Welcome back. You're watching the Jacksonville History Show. I'm Harry Reagan. Our guests are Robin Robinson and Edward Booth. And now we're going to talk about some successful preservation efforts.
Exactly. There's a lot of positive news, and we should spend as much time talking about that as we do about buildings that are challenged. So let's get started. We're going to first talk about the Ritz Theater. The Ritz Theater anchors the Lavilla restoration project, which began around 2001, 2002, and was an attempt to revitalize a once thriving district. A lot of work to be done. The number of buildings that were envisioned have yet to materialize, but it is a great location, and I think eventually will become a part of Jacksonville's front door. That is really what it was envisioned as.
In a very historic building.
Exactly. This was
When was the restoration completed on it?
I believe 2002, 2003. And it is a good performance space. There's a museum in there.
Yeah.
It does see some frequent use. An excellent example of a save is the old train station, converted to a convention center back in the 1980s, named for Prime Osborne, a community leader who really had the vision for this. And it is a structure that will continue to serve us well for any number of uses. We don't stick to buildings. We've had boats and trains, and this is a sign. Good to the last drop. Everyone who's lived in Jacksonville over the past 50 or 60 years will recognize this sign.
And not only the sign, but the building and all that coffee would have gone to New Jersey or someplace because they were about to close this plant.
You'll recall it was in the early 80s. There was competition between the Maxwell House plant in Hoboken, New Jersey, and Jacksonville, Florida, and we won the competition, and the sign was saved.
One of the best things is the smell of coffee as you pass by.
Yes, people.
An odor that we don't object to.
Right, right.
That's correct. Florida Theater.
Yeah.
If I had to name a number one save, it would probably be this building. Opened in 1927, fell into disrepair, and eventually closed in the mid-70s. Could have been torn down.
And this was one of the theaters that they were all over the country. Jacksonville had this one, that were palaces. They weren't just movie theaters. They were really something special.
Right.
The Fox Theater in Atlanta was another example.
Exactly, and this next slide shows you some of the magnificent architecture that has been preserved, and you see that theme repeated on the inside of the building. But this is in frequent use and is an example of what can be done with historic buildings. This was a Clutho design known as the YWCA building that is now a city government office known as the Jake Godbold Annex, I believe. Sits facing Hemming Plaza. 11 East Adams Street. This structure dates back to the 20s. Has been reused as apartment buildings and has been very successful.
And what was it?
It was the American Heritage Life Insurance building in its early days. The Morocco Shrine building, I believe another Clutho design that sits downtown, that is now used by a life insurance company, but is an example of some very interesting architecture that even though it's not consistent with anything else downtown, it's part of our heritage, and it continues to work.
Sure. You want some diversity.
Right.
And that's
variety.
Part of it.
Jacksonville's original high school, Duval High, that sits on Ocean Street, was retooled about 25 years ago as the Stevens Duval Apartments, and has had full occupancy ever since.
And this was the first, but there have been several others of converting schools into residential development.
Schools from that era have lent themselves well.
Most recently.
We'll see the John Gorey in a minute. The Southside Grammar School in San Marco has been put to the same use, and they've been very, very successful. The St. James Building, now Jacksonville City Hall, sits facing the north side of Hemming Plaza.
And old-timers will remember this as the May Cohens or Cohen brothers, depending
Right.
on how old you are.
Right.
This is an example of a run-of-the-mill house on Ocean Street that, despite being 110 years old, is still in use today, renting rooms by the week.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an example of a variety of uses. There are some buildings downtown that never fell into disrepair. This is St. John's Episcopal Cathedral, 110 years young. Looks as good or better than the day it was built. And with its parish hall next door, looks like something you could see in France. But we have it here in downtown Jacksonville, and it's one of many churches in that area that have been preserved over the past 100 years. One example of how things can be saved and then come to somewhat of a standstill is Old Brewster Hospital. It was the hospital for African Americans, was saved from a near basket case 10 years ago.
And moved, right? Moved to a different location.
Moved 2 or 3 times during its life, and rebuilt to very nice standards. Yet 10 years later, it sits without a use.
So those of us who believe very strongly in preservation want to see things not only saved but put to use.
Put to good use, yes.
And we're not giving up on the Brewster.
Good.
And this sits on Monroe Street in the Lavilla section. It's would seem perfectly suited as an office building.
All right. Attorneys, whoever.
Whoever. It's 2 blocks from the new courthouse. It would make a nice law office. So we hope to see that occupied.
Maybe we can help market it.
Hope so. I'd like to see the chain link fence taken down.
Yeah.
It doesn't add much to it. We owe this to Dolores Weaver's generosity and vision. This is the John Gorey, which has been taken from a high school, a middle school, to luxury residences, and I understand is doing quite well. Some more success stories. Our history book features some eagles that appear on this school in the Panama Park area. For years, we weren't sure where the eagles were. They were covered thusly.
Right.
Didn't know really what was under there, but fortunately, they reemerged in pristine condition as part of a new private school. And it's just an example of how private industry can come in and take over a former public building and restore it to its original glory. This was another Clutho design, so the eagles that grace the cover of our architectural book are secure for the foreseeable future. And that's what they look like on the cover. The old federal courthouse downtown, as we speak, is being renovated into office space for the state attorney. Depression-era building has some lovely public artwork on the outside, and it will be completed in about another year. And last but not least, Friendship Park, Friendship Fountain was in a state of disrepair because of plumbing problems, and together with the restoration of the South Bank Riverwalk, this has been saved. So this is an example, Harry, of a number of success stories, and last but not least would be the Jacksonville Historical Society's complex, St. Andrews, the Merrill House, Old St. Luke's, and the Casket Factory. So we have been responsible for saving those structures.
Robin, we practice what we preach.
That's certainly right. It was a big endeavor to take on Old St. Luke's and the Casket Factory, and we have risen to the occasion and done that. And
we should point out that Old St. Andrews and the Merrill House were kind of a partnership with the city, and the city really owns them.
Right.
But the other two, Old St. Luke's and the Casket Factory,
we own
with a little
them.
bit of help from the city financially, but we own them.
Which means we're
Society.
responsible for
Yes.
them, yes. And
anybody who's ever owned historical buildings knows what that's all about.
Yeah, maintenance.
But it's important, I think, and maybe an increasing number of people understand the importance of historical preservation. And it's not just us building huggers.
Well, I might mention that the old St. Luke's is being utilized as our archives, which was a very much needed space. We had no place to keep our historical archives that were in-house, and so now we do. So we put that to a good use.
And this list, which we've mentioned, is a changing list that we saw in the early part of the show. We are open to suggestions from people who may know of properties that are endangered, and add them to the list. Well, thank you, Robin Robinson and Edward Booth, for being with us on the Jacksonville History Show.
Enjoyed it.
We'll revisit this list because it changes from time to time. And that's our show. Thanks for watching. You can find out more about Jacksonville history on our website, www.jackshistory.com. And until next time, we're history.